No one believed this could happen in the heart of England, but on that night, the impossible became inevitable. Birmingham, the very city that once symbolized working-class pride and British strength, turned into a war zone. Sirens, smoke, and screams blended into chaos even the most alarmist papers wouldn't have dared predict. And all under the silent gaze of a government that promised stability but delivered disorder. The images seemed plucked from a nightmare. Police under attack, British flags burning, and a people shouting what Downing Street pretended not to hear. "We've lost control!" Cameras broadcast the collapse live, while Starmer smiled at a diplomatic event, and the country crumbled. It was the portrait of a nation abandoned by those meant to protect it. What began as a protest became the rawest reflection of truth. The UK, under Starmer, is no longer the same. It is an island adrift, led by those who do not understand what it means to be British. Nigel Farage saw it all before anyone else. While ministers slept and newsrooms tried to mask panic with tepid headlines, he was the only one to say what no one dared admit. "The government has lost the country." His words exploded online like dynamite. Millions of views in hours, and a feeling long buried in the hearts of Britons began to surface. Farage spoke not with diplomacy, but with anger, with truth, with the boiling blood of someone who loves his country and refuses to see it weakened. While Starmer hid behind rehearsed speeches, Farage faced the people head-on, like a real leader. Every word from him was a slap to the establishment. And with each cowardly silence from the government, his voice became a collective cry. That night was not just the start of unrest, it was the awakening of a revolt. England was tired of watching its own collapse. In the hours that followed, chaos spread like wildfire. London, Manchester, Liverpool, each city echoed the same sounds: sirens, helicopters, and the fury of a people who no longer believed in promises. Exhausted and demoralized police began to retreat. And when the people realized authority feared them, something changed forever. The streets no longer belonged to the government. They returned to those who had always sustained them, the ordinary citizen. State television tried to soften it, calling it temporary instability. But those who saw the images knew it was collapse in slow motion. The UK, which once taught the world order, now taught surrender. And Starmer? Vanished. No statement, no plan. Just silence. The cowardly silence of someone who has lost control but still pretends to be in charge. While Downing Street feigned calm, the country imploded. A leaked internal document revealed 12 security warnings ignored in the previous weeks. 12 chances to avert disaster, squandered through incompetence. The tabloids tried to shield the government, but social media exposed it all. Videos of exhausted police, injured citizens, and entire neighborhoods overrun by radical groups. The public saw the raw truth. This was no isolated incident, but an entire system in collapse. And at the center of it all, Starmer, the man who promised to restore order, brought only shame. Every image, every statistic, every tear on the streets revealed the failure no speech could hide. It was the price of arrogance, ignoring the people and believing control could be maintained with words. But the streets of Birmingham proved otherwise. When trust dies, power dies with it. The next morning, the sun rose over an unrecognizable country. Burnt-out cars, looted shops, and trampled flags. It was the portrait of a Britain that no longer trusted even its own police. Radio stations tried to keep composure, but the public only wanted answers. Where was the Prime Minister? Where were the ministers who swore to protect the people? None appeared. The truth was, While families locked their doors and churches sheltered frightened children, Starmer's cabinet discussed public image. The priority was not the people, but marketing, and the result was devastating. 68% of Britons declared they no longer trusted the government. The streets demanded leadership, but received only silence and rehearsed apologies. It was the kind of silence that screams louder than any speech. And in that moment, the people understood. This was not just about security. It was about dignity. Nigel Farage, without script or consultant, went on air and said what millions felt. This is not government. It is surrender. In less than 2 hours, his speech crossed borders, shared even in countries that once saw the UK as a symbol of stability. Farage spoke of something Starmer never understood: the value of truth. He did not appeal to cold numbers, but to the British soul. A country that fears its own people is not free, he said. And the impact was immediate. Ordinary Britons, ignored for years, felt heard. He was not talking about politics. He was talking about identity. While bureaucrats debated reports, Farage reignited the spirit that built an empire: courage, honor, and order. It was the start of a moral turning point. Starmer's government could control the microphone, but no longer the heart of the people. The government's response came late, and worse, it came empty. Starmer appeared on television with the same rehearsed expression, promising to restore calm and investigate the incidents. But the people had stopped listening. His words rang hollow, the echo of an authority that existed only on paper. As he read from the teleprompter, helicopters circled burning neighborhoods, and Scotland Yard officers admitted, "We don't have enough men to contain this." The country that once inspired the world with its discipline now begged for help within its own borders. It was the portrait of a nation betrayed. Starmer wanted to appear statesmanlike, but looked only like a man trying to save his own image. Every word from him fueled the revolt. England did not want comfort. It wanted action. And that action never came, because a government without courage is worse than no government at all. Before I go on, let me ask you something important. If you also feel the UK is being handed over by weak hands and want to see the truth spoken without fear, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. That's how our voice stays alive, even when they try to silence the truth. Every like and subscription shows there is still a people who love this nation and will not bow to chaos. As chaos took the streets, the markets reacted. The pound plummeted, investors fled, and foreign papers ran headlines that shamed any patriot. Britain loses control. The Westminster elite called it temporary instability, but the people knew it was the price of weakness. The numbers spoke for themselves. 2.3 million spent on security, and nothing was prevented. The country spent money putting out fires it had itself started. Nigel Farage, on the other hand, did not back down. He went to the streets, spoke with veterans, police, workers, and heard what Starmer never wanted to hear. We don't trust them anymore. It was a moral rupture. When the citizen stops believing in authority, authority ceases to exist. And that was exactly what began to happen. A slow but irreversible disintegration of a government that lost respect before it lost power. That week, something unprecedented happened. For the first time in decades, soldiers were positioned on British streets, not to defend borders, but to protect the government from its own people. The images went global. Tanks near Parliament, armed soldiers facing citizens who only asked for justice. It was the ultimate symbol of failure. A government that must fear its own voters does not govern. It occupies. And that was exactly what Starmer turned the UK into. A country occupied by its own elite. While he spoke of democracy and order, people saw barricades, censorship, and fear. The public did not want war. It wanted respect. But power, when arrogant, confuses authority with domination. And when the people lose fear, the castle crumbles. Farage said, "They forgot they serve the nation, not the other way around." And that phrase became a rallying cry. And tell me in the comments, from which part of the UK or the world are you watching this video? I want to see how far this chain of Britons who still believe in truth, justice, and the strength of our people reaches. Write below, because every one of your voices is part of this resistance. The following days proved the collapse was not temporary. It was structural. Banks began limiting withdrawals, insurers stopped covering urban damage, and 90 councils suspended services. The entire system entered silent collapse. It was no longer a security crisis, it was a crisis of trust. The UK, which once exported stability to the world, now exported warning. And once again, it was Farage who brought clarity to the chaos. In a national broadcast, he said what no minister dared repeat. The problem is not the people in the streets. The problem is the government in the palaces. His words resonated across generations. Young, old, workers all recognized themselves in that speech. Fear gave way to conviction, and what was once revolt became something more powerful, an awakening. The UK was not crumbling, it was waking up. By this point, even inside Parliament, the mood was panic. Ministers resigned in droves, aides left offices with hidden files under their arms, and the Labour Party began to fracture. The press tried to control the narrative, but live cameras showed the truth. Streets taken, squares occupied, and citizens defying police with signs reading, "We remember who we are." It was the cry of a nation recalling its own strength. And the more Starmer tried to speak of reform and stability, the more he seemed a puppet of a broken system. The opposition found its voice, and even former allies began to distance themselves. Inside the chambers, silence and tension. Outside, an entire country waking from a political trance. The UK was not asking for change, it was demanding it. And no parliamentary Iron Curtain could hide that. Farage, this time, did not need to shout. His mere presence was enough to ignite hearts. In his broadcasts, he spoke less of politics and more of purpose. "What is a government without morals?" he asked. The answer came from the streets. Nothing. That was it. The England of Churchill, of Thatcher, of generations that faced wars, now faced its greatest enemy, the cowardice of its leaders. Farage did not offer an economic plan, but an emotional truth. The country needed to remember itself. Churches filled up, not for religious faith, but for a search for meaning. Old veterans marched with unemployed youth. The chaos was no longer destruction, but purification. And Starmer, locked in Downing Street, watched helplessly. He had lost the country not through a single mistake, but by forgetting the essential. No power survives without the people's respect. The UK was different now. It was no longer a country that knelt before bureaucrats or accepted rehearsed apologies. In the squares, families lit candles, veterans held worn flags, and young people sang forgotten anthems. The media tried to call it radicalization, but every Briton knew it was memory. The people did not want revolution. They wanted return to truth, to honor, to the value of a word. Starmer, surrounded by advisers and guards, looked out from the windows of Downing Street and saw something that terrified him more than chaos. Unity. For the first time in years, right, center, and even parts of the left shared the same feeling: betrayal. They realized the fight was no longer political, but moral. And in the moral field, the people always win. The flames that burned Birmingham were not destruction. They were purification, the fire of truth reigniting a nation. And when silence finally fell over the country, it did not bring peace, it brought awareness. The empty streets were not a sign of fear, but of waiting. The people no longer shouted, they simply watched, because the farce had fallen. Authority without soul inspires not obedience, but pity. Farage, in his final broadcast, summed it up in a phrase that would echo for generations. Great Britain does not need saving. It needs to remember who it is. And the people understood. Order would return, but not imposed, earned. The barricades erected before Parliament did not protect the government. They protected an illusion. Because a state without trust is just a building with a flag. And there, in the heart of Old England, power changed hands. It returned to those who never truly lost it, the British people. And when the people awaken, no Starmer in the world can sleep again.